Afton and the leak. Probably one of the most iconic when it comes to Springlock failures is William Afton. William Afton from the games, that is. In this version of the story, William Afton basically got destroyed by these Springlocks. He was fully impaled by the Springlocks in the Springlock Bonnie suit after trying to escape the ghosts of his victims. He thought hiding inside the Spring Bonnie suit would protect him, but hey, he was wrong. It turned out that there was water on the floor which, when he touched, caused the Springlocks in the suit to loosen, or water that possibly dripped down from him, and also his breath. This caused the Springlocks to malfunction, they fully released and impaled William, ultimately causing his death. However, this is William Afton, so even dying would not keep him dead forever. It only keep him dead for a little while. We later learned that one of the vengeful spirits, or possibly a pair of them, cursed William to experience the pain that they had felt, thereby extending his life indefinitely, no matter the pain he suffered. Which is how William Afton can be a shambling corpse, but also somehow still alive. And friends, before I move on to this next spot on the list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Gaming, and if you love FNAF 2, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9, Bite of 87. Well, we don't really know for sure if this is correct, as the Bite of 87 is still not fully confirmed in terms of all the details. It is possible that it was the result of a Springlock failure. It's believed that the Bite of 87 led to the fatal injury of a guest when the frontal lobe of their brain was badly damaged in an incident related to Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Now, based on the Bite of 83, we can imagine it may have been a similar incident where someone basically stuck their head inside an animatronic and kinda had it chomped. Or it could have been something else that happened. But either way, if it was similar to the Bite of 83, or even if it wasn't, it seems likely that a Springlock failure could be possible, as the suits may have still been in use at that time. As the suits may still have been in use at the time that this terrible incident occurred. Now, some might say they stopped being used after the Bite of 83, but with a timeline this wonky, I don't think we have anything that is 100% concrete conclusive yet in regards to when Springlock suits stopped being used across the board forever. Also, I feel like there are times maybe where they were like, let's stop using them for like a bit, and then we think we fixed them, and then they're still, dysfunctional. Because that's just how Springlock suits are. I would never even go near one of those things. Death trap. Number 8. Can you Springlock a ghost? To answer this question, we could turn to the Fazbear Frights book 135 AM, and one of the stories within its pages, titled The New Kid. In this story, a young boy named Devin befriends the new kid at school, Kelsey. However, while his other friend Mick seems to really like Kelsey, and at first, Devin does too, eventually Devin becomes jealous of Kelsey. When Kelsey seemingly ditches them one day when they're all hanging out, Devin decides to get revenge on him for doing this. Finding a new hangout spot, a now abandoned former Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, Devin dares Kelsey to put on a Springlock suit. Kelsey does this and begins dancing around, but doing so, of course, triggers the Springlocks within the suit to release, seemingly impaling him. While initially Devin and Mick leave Kelsey there for dead, Devin eventually returns to investigate, with Mick wondering if Kelsey might still be alive. When Devin does return, he doesn't see Kelsey in the suit, but later spots a black-haired ghostly figure within. It is implied that Kelsey is some kind of spirit of vengeance, possibly one of the spirits from the game lore that possessed Golden Freddy. And if you're wondering how we know that, well, later in the book we see that Kelsey is alive and well, seemingly, after he seemed to have been Springlocked, so either he has superpowers or he a ghost.
And it's 7 required. The Springlock suits themselves are an occupational hazard that they didn't really need to create. Like, these things are hella deadly, and both William and Henry allow for their employees to wear them. Like, goddamn, okay? Just make a separate suit for the animatronic characters, for the employees, okay? Like, the people who run your business. They are the ones who make you the money, so they don't end up dying from robotic parts replacing their internal organs. OSHA would have been all over these goddamn suits if it was real in this universe, but apparently I guess it's not. And honestly, it's probably required by your contract to wear these suits at work, and if you refuse, you're probably gonna get fired, especially considering how they started getting ready to fire Jeremy because he saw Glitch Trap in Help Wanted. So why wouldn't they fire you for not wearing your suit if it's in your contract? Even if you claim it was to protect your life, they'd find another reason that you couldn't really fight against. So, especially, you know, when a serial killer is the CEO. And its 6 implications. Now, while the term Springlock is used in real life, it's totally different from the actual FNAF mechanism. I'm certain most of you got the whole Springlocks are real line from Springlocks and You, How Not to Die Remastered. It's a thread on the FNAF wiki. However, actual Springlocks are just locks that use springs, okay? From my research, what I gathered is that a Springlock in real life is, in simplest terms, a spring lock. It's like if your front door's deadbolt was on a spring. Every other instance talking about real spring locks or just ends up bringing you back or quotes this page. So it's kind of circular logic, okay? You can't use evidence within the thing that you're trying to prove as proof that it is real. It's like plugging a power bar into itself. It doesn't work. You can't use the same article to prove that spring locks are real, okay? Because they're not. At least their game form isn't. But if the Springlock failure was real, I think the implications of like all of this being real in general is like one of the worst things. You get it? Like it's definitely in the top 10. Get it? It's a little meta content joke for you because this is a top 10 list. It's in the top 10. Halfway through into number 5, comments. I've mentioned this in previous videos, mostly to explain why there won't ever be an actual real FNAF restaurant that you'll be able to walk into, and it still remains true since we're only getting a virtual diner that you can only order online. However, I think that one of the worst things still, and especially when it comes to these suits, is the goddamn comments about them. You wanna know a comment that I saw yesterday? Well, yesterday for me as I was writing this, Wednesday for you. Okay, I saw someone say that they want to be spring-locked. What? Why? Why would you want to be spring-locked? Do you know how messed up that is? You're saying that you want to be killed by this thing? Because there's some hotlines that you should call. Like, why on sweet heaven's earth would you want to be spring-locked? Do you know how absolutely agonizingly painful that would be? That would be one of the worst things imaginable, okay? Holy sweet Lord baby Jesus W. Christ. That would be one of the worst ways to go, if not the worst way. At least like as far as like actually could happen goes, I think at least, okay? Because like a volcano would suck, but it's a bit unrealistic. It's a bad idea, okay? Stop doing this. Stop saying this. Okay, talk to a doctor. Paperwork. One of the worst things for the survivors after a Springlock failure has to be the paperwork that is associated with it, because goddamn. Someone dying in your building is one thing. Someone dying in your building because of something in your building is another, and then add on to that the fact that they were your employee and probably forced into that suit without because of their contract, and you'll be filing reports until you have to retire. Okay, especially because one mistake on those papers means like even more paperwork, and I don't really know anyone who likes to do paperwork. Personally, I hate it, but that's also because my ADHD makes me it makes it unbearable for me, honestly. Like, it's even tough to write scripts sometimes, but I mean, eventually I have to, but like that's where my brain thrives, you know, in that stressful environment, which is not good for my health. But if it was that kind of paperwork, I would honestly just quit, because there was no way in hell that I would even want to attempt to keep my focus on that when I can just scroll through TikTok or YouTube instead. So yeah, no thanks. But ultimately into number 2, replaced. Oh yeah, don't forget your bones being replaced with metal ones. Yeah, like sure, there's surgery for people who need repairs or replacements, okay? I think like hip replacements are probably the most common actually. However, those have whole processes behind them to ensure a fast recovery and, you know, survival, not being infected. All of a sudden being shoved full of metal bones where normal ones used to be, that's a guaranteed infection at the very least, especially considering how, you know, your normal bones have to go somewhere else. And whether they're just crushed and then spread out inside you or just pushed out the other side, you're going to be in a hell of a lot of pain. Plus, you know, probably not alive, which I guess is a good thing, since you won't really have to deal with the intense pain for too long, hopefully. But this actually makes me think, if you replace all of your bones with metal ones, are you still you? Is this like a Ship of Theseus moment? Am I about to have like a WandaVision finale? Or like, are we just our brain? And if we are our brain, does that mean that if we have a brain transplant, do we become another person despite it still being my body? And does that mean that we're just like a brain piloting a bone mech with meat armor? Oh no, existential crisis! And finally, in number Number 1, death. I mean, don't get me wrong, okay? But the worst thing about a Springlock failure has to be the whole death part, right? Ignore my mumbling. I mean, honestly, okay, it's obviously not for some of you, given the whole comments thing earlier, but the only reason you wouldn't die in a Springlock suit is because you're a main character and need to be around for the story. And then you're just in agonizing pain for the rest of your life. Yeah, the only people who have survived a Springlock failure, well, confirmed, is William. So, yeah, and you know, he's like the main antagonist of the game and was only able to survive since the spirit of a victim was keeping him alive. And in the books, William also ended up getting Springlocked before, but then got out of the suit, since Dave Miller, who is revealed to be William, has scars from a previous Springlock failure from before he becomes Springtrap in the books. So the only one who can ever really survive seems to be William, and he's survived it twice. Anyone else is boned, and personally I'd rather not die by having millions of small metal bits and several dozen large ones shoved into my body, trying to replace my body. I would rather die peacefully in my sleep with Chica's hand around my throat.
Number 3, payback. Going back to the Fazbear Fright story, the new kid from the 1:35 a.m. book, Kelsey, wasn't the only one to get Springlocked in the story. When Devin returns to the abandoned Freddy's to see if Kelsey might still be alive, he notices the suit is empty. He thinks he sees something further inside, and so he decides to reach into the mouth of the suit, only for the suit to seemingly clamp down on his arm. Of course, you should never do that. If you see something and you're like, oh, maybe I'll put my arm in this thing where my arm could get stuck, don't do it. The more he struggles, the more he seems to get sucked into the suit. Sure, this isn't so much a Springlock failure from the inside, you know, and no one's wearing the suit in some of these. It's more reminiscent of the Bite of 83, because I don't think there was anyone in that suit. But this is still a Springlock suit failing. So, while different, I still consider it to be a failure with consequences. Consequences being, you know, Devin also likely died. Number 1, multiple. Well, Shadow Freddy and RWQFS-FASXC may have been debunked as Springlock failure victims by Scott himself, this theory didn't come out of nowhere. In fact, many thought that they were among those generally referred to in FNAF 3 during Phone Guy's recording for night number 4. Here, Phone Guy mentions that the Springlock suits are being discontinued as a result of an unfortunate incident at the sister location involving multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures, which I gotta say, it makes sense to me too, because I'm like, what were all these multiple Springlock failures? What does that entail, and how many were there? Oh boy. I can't even believe that there have been that many Springlock failures. Honestly, these suits should have been decommissioned a long time ago. That's for sure. I know I would not get in one, I would not go near one, they dangerous. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for watching. Till next time, keep on gaming on. Pew pew!
An intense Springtrap. I believe we all know this story by now, okay? Everything was going well at first, they couldn't pin him down, and he was on his way to immortality. Once William discovered Remnant, however, he spiraled. He wanted to use it to fuel his life and make him truly immortal, so in an effort to study it further, William lures the possessed animatronics to a back room that they can't normally access, and then uses it to dismantle them, planning to melt down their endoskeletons to make soul-infused metal. However, by doing this, he unknowingly releases the souls of the victims that he claimed so long ago, and seeing these victims causes William to panic. Understandably, I mean, they're freaking ghost kids, and they're also the ghosts of kids that you killed, so yeah, then this absolute animatronic genius, the technician that has made the suits, handles the suit maintenance, and explained to every employee the proper procedure for putting these Springlock suits on, climbs into the Spring Bonnie suit that he actually uses to kill, and then climbs inside in such a panic that he actually didn't notice the moisture in the room, the leaking ceiling, and, you know, literally everything else, probably also his sweat, which caused the Springlocks that were active in this moment, since it was in suit mode, to fail. And I feel like that moment is the one of the most confusing mysteries. Why did he do that? He knows better. If he can avoid the cops for that long, why did he think that this was all just gonna be fine? Dude. In and on Cassidy. Cassidy is the most mysterious victim in the missing children's incident. Okay, her name was hidden for years, only being revealed in the survival logbook and then confirmed in the FNAF movie script Scott talked about in a post on Reddit. That script though was ultimately scrapped. And honestly, we don't really know much about her. We don't know how she died, and there are plenty of theories that claim to have evidence of her being a Springlock victim. Maybe William knew that that would be an easier way than just, I don't know, a knife. I mean, after all, she does possess Golden Freddy, and some figure that he could be a Springlock suit that had the guts removed, hence the slumped over nature in his FNAF 1 and 2 forms. However, if this was the case, and Cassidy's body was in that suit, wouldn't they have found it when they were gutting the animatronic? But maybe, then again, William was the one who gutted it, considering how he was the suit technician. For a suit technician though, he did miss a fatal flaw with the animatronics he literally designed, since he got in the suit when it was wet like we just talked about. But either way, Cassidy being a Springlock victim could be true, but it's still a mystery. At least until Scott acknowledges the idea. Until then, it's just a theory, so don't go around saying that it's fact. It's a mystery. We don't know. And at 8, Kelsey. Kelsey is in essence the main antagonist of the Fazbear Frights story The New Kid from the 3rd Fazbear Frights book 135 AM. Kelsey had just moved to town and ends up becoming friends with the main protagonist, Devin. Devin ends up getting jealous of how much everyone loves Kelsey though, so he hatches a plan with his other friend to trap Kelsey in a Springlock suit for a few hours. However, when they unleash their plan, the Springlock suit fails and kills Kelsey. I mean, if you're going to trap him in a Springlock suit, I mean, isn't that isn't that how you would have trapped him normally? I didn't think you really thought that plan through. But at least they thought it killed him. Since a week later, Devin returns to make sure that Kelsey is still in there, only to find a different body in the suit. He knows that it's someone else because the hair color is different. And then Devin gets stuck inside the suit because he reached his arm in and then he bleeds out. Only for the story to cut back to Kelsey meeting 2 more kids at his new school. It is definitely an interesting story because while Kelsey did get Springlock, he ended up being fine. So what really happened? Some think that Kelsey is a ghost, some think that he's supposed to be the one you should not have killed, but no matter what, we all feel like that there's a high possibility that Kelsey was a Springlock victim, or you should have been, but we don't know how and we don't know when, but I mean it's still a definite possibility, which makes it a mystery. Not really an impactful one though, so in at 8 it goes.
Number 7. The Amazing Escape. William Afton in the books is much more lucky, or perhaps just more brilliant than his video game counterpart, at least when it comes to dodging Springlocks somehow. Like in the games, he ends up getting Springlocked, but instead of being killed by this experience, he miraculously survives, seeming to somehow pull a Harry Houdini and just escape that. While Charlie activates the Springlocks in the suit he's wearing at the end of the novel Five Nights at Freddy's The Silver Eyes, we learn in the next book, The Twisted Ones, that the blood found in the scene ends up being analyzed in a lab and found to be fake blood. Finally, in the 4th closet, it is confirmed that William Afton, while harmed, miraculously survived being Springlocked. I don't know how this is possible, but it's a thing that happened. Pretty impressive considering in most other cases, it's pretty much a death sentence. Number 6. Triggered by wriggling off mini arenas. This is probably my favorite consequence when it comes to the Springlocks malfunctioning. Likely because you yourself actually get to experience failure in a way. But obviously not in real life because that would be awful and horrible and extremely painful. Instead, you experience it in game. So although you can't feel it, you can't imagine what it would feel like, which honestly is also terrifying to do. This time when the Springlocks fail, it is as a result of your movement. You are the one who must wriggle to shake off the mini arenas, which are climbing up the suit and attempting to kinda climb into it with you. If this happens enough times, the mini arenas jump scare will get triggered, implying your death by mini arenas. However, if you also wriggle too much to keep them off you, without winding the Springlocks back up enough, you will trigger the Springlocks release, which will also result in your death by being impaled by suit parts which are released by those Springlocks. Yikes. Number 5. The Fate of Shadow Freddy. Shadow Freddy is thought by some, in regards to lore, to have been a possible Springlock victim. The consequences of this employee's Springlock failure would be, of course, that they died. That's right, people believe that Shadow Freddy, who appears to be somewhat ghostly in nature, is actually the spirit of a former Freddy's employee, who died while wearing a Springlock Freddy suit. It's believed that for one reason or another, the suit malfunctioned, murdering its wearer. As a result, Shadow Freddy was born to haunt its former workplace, and was also likely one of the reasons that Springlock suits stopped being used, at least temporarily. Although apparently not soon enough, as there were other failures that occurred possibly even after this one. Number 4. The fate of RWQFSFASXC. Some believe that not only is Shadow Freddy a victim of the Springlock's failing, but so is the shadowy figure of RWQFSFASXC. They believe that this shadowy Bonnie was another employee who, instead of being killed by the Springlock Freddy suit, met their end while inside the Springlock Bonnie suit, which also failed. My question is, if these employees happen to both die as a result of wearing and using the Springlock suits and the suits malfunctioning, did they die on the same day? Because if not, why would you ever continue to use these suits as a company? And why would you ever, as an employee, agree to get in another one? Unless one of them was hired after the other one and like no one told them about what happened to the last person to put on one of those suits? Still, legal liability right there. Like, my alarms are going off for like lawsuits. Of course, this was only a theory anyways, and actually one that Scott claimed was incorrect in regards to the true origins of both Shadow Freddy and RWQFSFASXC.
Getting close to the end, in number 3, Golden Fredbear. One theory I've seen plenty of times, and I'm pretty sure was mostly the start of FNAF 4 theory, was that Golden Freddy and Fredbear are the same animatronic, suggesting that the reason Golden Freddy is all limp in the original FNAF and FNAF 2 is because his endoskeleton was removed after Crying Child's bite in 1983, and that's why the suit has to teleport around and cause hallucinations, because it can't actually move. This would also probably mean that Crying Child was the one in the Golden Freddy suit. However, we know that this isn't true based on the characters being separate in Ultimate Custom Night and not just coloring and size, since Golden Freddy is much smaller than Fredbear would have been, since, you know, Fredbear would have to accommodate a human and Golden Freddy wouldn't, since he would just be an animatronic and not a Springlock suit. But honestly, at this point, the actual design doesn't really seem to matter, since Springtrap went to Scrap Trap and then to Burn Trap, so honestly it's all up in the air. However, I have yet to see proper substantial evidence of this being the case, and I don't think that they would have removed the endoskeleton before that. But ultimately, in number 2, Shadow Animatronics. One of the oldest theories is that the Shadow Animatronics are the first Springlock victims, and this comes to us after the FNAF 3 phone guide dialogue that mentioned multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures, which some interpreted as multiple Springlock suits failing at once, since the term Springlock in this situation is being used to describe the suit as a whole and not the actual individual mechanisms that make up the suit. So, the line of multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures could mean multiple of the Springlocks inside the suit failing at the same time, or just multiple suits failing. This led some to theorize that previous employees were killed in the Springlock suit, which is where the Shadow Animatronics come from. This is supported by the fact that these are both shadows of Freddy and Bonnie, the two animatronics that have Springlock versions. I mean, there are some holes in this theory, because, you know, one of them looks like Toy Bonnie, and Toy Bonnie's not a Springlock suit, but there is potential that this is the case, because again, designs, consistency doesn't really seem to matter anymore. And finally, in at number 1, Double Trouble. Could William have suffered a Springlock failure before getting trapped in the Springlock Bonnie suit that we see in FNAF 3? It is possible, okay, and it certainly appears like this could be the case in the FNAF novels. Well, it is the case in the FNAF novels, but because of that, it could be the case in the games. Since William in the books is described to have scars that are consistent with a Springlock failure before actually becoming Springtrap in the books. So, could it have happened in the games? Could William have been the reason that the Springlock suits were actually retired? Since we do hear of the unfortunate incident at a sister location, so is that unfortunate incident instead William? There are plenty of people that it could be, but William having to deal with it would certainly get them put out of commission, because, you know, he's kind of up there, and I mean, he doesn't really seem to care about anyone else, so if they failed on them, why would he retire them? But with William continuing to use the suit and putting it on after, you know, when like the room was wet in FNAF 3, this could be unlikely unless he just doesn't have the capacity for trauma, but it's still possible either way, okay? So since this list is about mysteries, I feel like this deserves to be on it. And you know what? Be the capstone. In at 10, Elizabeth Afton. Elizabeth is at the top of this list because, well, she got killed, but she also doesn't really seem to deserve it until after she gets killed, and then she deserves the spring locking, which, I mean, in a way makes sense, and it's something that I've been using as evidence when it comes to who I think the vengeful spirit is, because, you know, spirits, when they're, you know, being spirits for longer periods of time, would understandably start to go crazy, or even crazier, and this is an idea that Supernatural, the show, has used in length, and the same idea, though, could be applying to Elizabeth and Crying Child. Just because you start off good or loving your father doesn't mean that you'll continue to see things remains that way in a few years' time. And Elizabeth, while not deserving of springlocking in 1983 when she dies, definitely deserves one come sister location in FNAF 6. I mean, she literally betrays her brother and sister location, nearly killing him, and then, again, she also betrayed him, and then in FNAF 6, she wants to make her father proud. Her murderous, psychopathic father. She wants to make him proud. Considering how you've been possessing an animatronic that he made that caused you to die, that he made, I think that you would have already made him pretty proud, I guess. It's a damn shame that you turned into this, but whatever. In at 9, Mr. Hippo. Okay, this is kind of a joke number, but also not, because Mr. Hippo is literally the worst thing ever in Ultimate Custom Night. Mr. Hippo is a viable animatronic from FNAF 6 that returns as an antagonist in Ultimate Custom Night. Okay, Mr. Hippo will climb through the duct systems trying to reach one of the 2 hoses in the office. Hoses? Is that right? I don't know. I just copied and pasted that line from the wiki. The player needs to use an audio lure to keep him in place and to move him around so that they can use the heater to push him back, and he is fooled 100% of the time by the audio lure. Also is fooled faster than Helpy Frog. However, most of the scare factor from this animatronic doesn't come from their behavior or their design. This time around, rather, their death lines. Cause you see, Mr. Hippo has a knack for going on about things. A lot. Okay, it's like me on a first date. Still, he will go into like 5-minute long speeches that you have to deal with every time he kills you. Meaning that if you get jump scared, you're boned for enough time to make a sandwich, okay? Which is annoying as hell. Getting killed by him enough will eventually and cause you to end up agreeing with me that he needs to be springlocked. Because you end up knowing what comes after the smoke of the jump scare clears, and it's just pain. In at 8, Roxy. Okay, I know that Roxy and Mr. Hippo are animatronics and incapable of actually feeling pain because of a spring locking, but honestly, I also just hate this kind of person. The self-centered tool bag who only cares about themselves, whether they secretly hate themselves or not, that's not what matters here, okay? Who you are and what kind of person you are is defined by how you treat others and who you are when the pressure is on. And Roxy is just horrible. And while they may not be able to feel pain from the spring locking, at least Roxy will be contained if they got spring locked, okay? And honestly, that's what I need. I don't want to deal with this personality type. I've dealt with enough people like this throughout my life, and I'm still only 22 goddamn years old, which means that I'm really fed up with this shit. So yeah, there's not much else to say with this one other than I want her to be restrained so that I don't have to deal with her. So yeah, that's it. That's the number. What are you still doing here? Go to the next one. And it's 7, Henry Emily. Now this is certainly an interesting case because seemingly Henry has died multiple ways across FNAF canons, with his first apparent death being in FNAF World at the hands of Baby. His death in the novels seems to have happened before the Silver Eye starts, and then he dies in FNAF 6 along with everything else. But could one of these deaths involve a springlock failure or something having to do with springlocks? I mean, maybe Afton offed Henry in one of these realities, finally actually, you know, took care of his worst enemy. Or maybe Baby has some springlock mechanisms that's inside of her that she used to kill Henry. I mean, hell, maybe Henry just climbed into the wrong suit at the wrong time, or maybe the right suit at the right time for him. It's a question that we don't really pay attention to because, I mean, Henry's death doesn't mean much to the story, unfortunately. I mean, it's true, it doesn't. Henry dying doesn't really mean much overall for the FNAF lore, okay? We didn't even know that he was alive until FNAF 6, for God's sakes. So maybe, for irony's sake, Scott had him bite the dust in a quicker way rather than just burning him alive. And at 6, Phone Guy. Phone Guy's death is one of the most mysterious deaths of all time, okay? We hear him die in FNAF 1 on night 4 with the sounds of multiple animatronics banging at his doors, but we never really get an explanation as to what happens to him. We know that he dies, but other than that, it's all speculation. One of the theories is that the animatronics got him and shoved him into a suit, resulting in a painful death, especially since at this point the springlock suits were either still in operation or hadn't been totally removed. The actual timeline of events for the springlock suits is a little messy since we don't really have the exact years for the things getting scrapped, yet it's still possible that Phone Guy was shoved into one, or maybe he tried to use it to hide. After all, maybe Phone Guy is secretly William Afton and Scott just doesn't want us to know that yet or something, and what we hear could just be the FNAF 3 cutscene. I mean, I doubt it, but it would be absolutely hilarious if he ended up pulling that on us, okay? And for all those saying that Phone Guy can't be Afton because Afton is British or whatever, so is Tom Holland, okay? It's called acting. You can fake an accent, especially if you're a serial killer who's trying to evade everything, you know? Kinda, yeah, it's a thing. And it ain't no bonus. The Springlock mechanism is probably the most intuitive thing that FNAF's world invented. The ability to move robotic parts out of the way enough for a human to fit inside is nuts. And while it may be dangerous, we also drive over 100 kilometers or miles, whatever, per hour in huge metal death boxes, so we can't necessarily complain about it. And while yes, they have their faults, there is nothing compared to the ability to be both animatronic and suit. That's an incredible feat of technology, and I'm sure they play into it with the marketing. Like, I mean, we hear the phone guy tapes from FNAF 3 talking about these things, okay? And he never mentions a bonus or anything like that for you risking your life with one of these damn suits. And even if you end up getting Springlocked, there doesn't really seem to be any compensation package for your loved ones. Hell, if you die, you may not even get your severance. Actually, maybe that's why they do it. Your family can file a lawsuit since, you know, you died on the job, but that's a lengthy court battle against a massive company with a serial killer who has yet to be caught at the front lines. It's not really gonna do much good for your fam. So the fact that you don't get a bonus if you get in one of these suits, let alone get Springlocked, no thanks. It's a red flag. Swipe left. And at 6, FNAF cops. The cops in the FNAF universe are absolutely the most moronic bunch of people I have ever, I guess, not seen, but heard of, honestly. Like, yeah, I get that they couldn't catch William for story purposes, but that seemingly was retconned, since in the first game they said that they had made an arrest. They could have ended it right there. The story could have been over, but they couldn't find the bodies, so they let him go. Yeah, ignore the animatronics that smell like death, are leaking blood and other bodily fluids, and that many parents have compared to reanimated corpses. Those don't have anything to do with this scenario. Yeah, totally. And even when they find baby's blueprints and see that she has a child storage tank, they don't do anything more than question him. Quote, "There's no doubting what you've achieved on a technical level. These are clearly state of the art. There are just certain design choices that were made for these robots that we don't fully understand. We were hoping that you could shed some light on those." Dude, arrest him! And search the bloody, rotten body smelling animatronics. God damn it, how hard is this? Okay, if it's a crime scene or a suspected crime scene, come on, if it's a crime scene, you don't need to have a warrant, for fuck's sakes, okay? They all deserve spring lockings for the sheer stupidity alone. I'm surprised that they didn't crawl into one and then get killed by it just because they're that damn stupid. In it for Vanessa. I feel like this one is kind of obvious, and you may get mad at me for saying this, but Vanessa deserves to be spring-locked, man, okay? You're probably thinking, but she's possessed, you moron. She doesn't have control over her actions. But that's the thing. She does. Vanessa has no willpower to sacrifice herself for the greater good, okay? At this point, I think that it's safe to infer that Jeremy from FNAF VR didn't go crazy because he just saw a glitch trap. It's fairly reasonable to say that he got possessed. Tape Girl hadn't broken glitch trap into the tapes yet, and he was probably just able to possess whoever he wanted. So if Jeremy did get possessed, and the possession worked in a similar way that it does with Vanessa, which would make sense, Jeremy would at times be sentient and in control of his own body. So if he knew about glitch trap, maybe he didn't cut his face off because he was freaking out like he had just taken like the Epsom salt because you use it in the bath. Maybe he did it to try and kill the monster that was inside of him. Okay, so if Vanessa had the gall, Afton wouldn't really have a vessel. Okay, especially since the VR game at this point was probably abandoned. But she won't. But she won't do it. So she deserves to be spring locked.